Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and after shipping out about 30 packages today, I thought a great video topic would be to talk about when I shipped out maybe 30 packages a year. Today we're going to talk about first to market. It's a term that is heavily romanticized. It's a time that I think everyone looks at with rose-colored glasses, and don't worry, what I'm going to do here is be a 100% buzz-killington and explain to you the reality of what first to market was like, and talk about why it's the riskiest time to enter at any point. You know, it's the highest risk reward ratio by far, not just for collectibles, not just for Pokemon, Magic, sports. It's the same for stocks, startup companies. It's pretty much the same general risk reward ratio. A lot of R's there. So first to market is simply you are just first to market. I mean, you're there when things are in their infancy. And the pro for that is prices are lower. And that's pretty much the end of the list because nothing else existed. And when I say nothing else, I mean no YouTube, no Instagram, no E4, no constant sales data. None of this stuff existed. It just wasn't a thing. Like in 2007, I could already feel, I already felt the fedora breeze, I already felt the tip, and I already felt the breeze. Well, YouTube was around in 2007. You're absolutely right, but people weren't using it for Pokemon, especially like they are now. You didn't see this beautiful grandma house. You didn't see countless amount of opening videos to the point where you just can't even watch all of them in a lifetime. This stuff either didn't exist at all or it was in its absolute infancy. Even stuff like grading that is now a staple. 2007, barely anybody was doing it. I could probably name all 10 people who were grading back in 2007. So therefore, first to market is, yes, the benefit is you get a lower price, but the risk reward is there's no indicator of growth because none of this stuff that we have now that we can put on our Captain Hindsight cape and look at everything in 2020 vision. None of that stuff existed back then. There was no way to predict that it was going to go this route. Now, of course, if you bought Charizard back then, back at $100, or you bought a base box at $1,000 or wherever the price was, you obviously did very well. That's the whole risk-reward situation. And keep in mind, that's the general cocktail for everything. Pokemon did well, but there's a lot of other collectibles that didn't. Just like Google did well, but there's a lot of other stocks that didn't survive the dot-com bubble, the housing crash, which is another relevant point. Back in 2007, that was right before the housing crash. When people talk about the next recession or whatever, it's not my first trip to the rodeo. I was there during the housing crash, before, during, and after. What do you think sales were like? Well, I'll tell you what sales were like. They were absolutely abysmal. It's really hard to explain to people who just weren't around back then what sales were like, because all you see are the numbers, and you don't understand the climate back then. So here's some examples. I remember Gary would list regularly a PSA, it was either like a PSA 9 Charizard base unlimited with a booster pack combo. Like kind of like a giveaway deal to incentivize you to buy that listing. Like literally the most popular card with a high grade and the most popular set sealed. And that pack wasn't even weighed. I mean, we're at the point now where it's like optimized, like how many grams is it? What are my ratios? Let me go look up the charts and the numerous analytics that we have today. None of that existed. None of that existed. Gary was just trying to get that Charizard out the door by putting a little pack in there to fluff it up a little bit because that's the level of desperation you were at. And even those items are like two of the most popular high-octane items in the hobby. It was still a slow deal. It still took a while. Here's some other examples. This one's going to hurt. If you're not strapped in, get a pillow, strap yourself in. This one's going to be brutal. I remember I sold a first edition PSA 9 Charizard for $365. No, I did not forget a zero. It was $365. And the buyer was picky and said, I don't like it. I don't like that little dot that's on there, which is now known as the black dot Charizard, I believe. Now it's considered an error. But back then he didn't like that. He didn't want that version. I believe it was, I don't know if it was the same black dot. Regardless, one of the super knowledgeable niche air collectors can tell me in the comments. But at the end of the day, they didn't like the card because it had that little dot on it. And they wanted a refund. And everyone is probably screaming right now into the camera, yeah, get that refund, get that card back. But at the time, I wanted him to keep that card because it was so hard to get that sale. That $365 sale, that $1 a day sale was a big deal. It didn't happen frequently. Again, the most popular cards with one of the highest grades. Today, that card sells for what, $15,000? And I was trying so hard for this guy just to keep that $365 sale. So that's what it was like back then. You were happy to get a sale. You were grateful to get a sale because they just really didn't occur at all like they do now. I would say the amount of sales I had today, I'm talking about 30 sales or whatever it is. And keep in mind, I'm an individual. I'm not like a troll and toad or, even someone beneath that. Sperm of the sperm whale. I would say that, the big stores back then, the biggest stores like the Troll and Toads or whatever, I would be surprised if they were doing 30 sales a day, and they're the largest entities back then. It was slow motion. There was no incentive. Again, no social media, no one to do whatever hot, cool thing is happening right now. None of this stuff. There was no way to communicate with people. If anything, that's why E4 started. It's because I wanted to talk more about collectibles. And at the time, PokeGym was just players. I made this thread where the collector's at, lasted about 2 years. I'm like, all right, we need a whole forum for this because I want to talk more. This isn't enough. And now I'm here talking to you in a camera. It's still not enough. But that's how this stuff started. It's a growth pattern. And there's no way anyone could have predicted, even me plus Gary plus whoever else, there's just no way you could have predicted the growth pattern. It's impossible. And that's why markets are so interesting. To tie this back into things like stocks, startups and things like that, that's why this risk reward ratio exists. There's going to be more failed or like anticlimactic startups, anticlimactic stocks and funds and things like that than there are Googles. Today it's easy to say, oh, there's your blue chip stock. But if you go back 20 years, you weren't saying that. And that's the thing I think a lot of people forget. Now, something else to talk about, to really drive this point home, because I think a lot of people are like, well, hang on, prices were lower and that's all I care about, right? All I care about is getting a deal and saving money and paying the least amount for the cards I want, which is understandable. But the reality of that is, when people try to understand why was it riskier back then? When I talk about that $365 PSA 9 first edition Charizard, people are like, well, you only tied up $365, right? The ultimate reality is I have more buyers today at $13,000 to $15,000 for that card than I did at $365 back then. I have more buyers today for a $500,000 Illustrator than I did when it was $50,000. I have more buyers today for Charizard base unlimited 10 at $5K than I did when it was like $100. True story. Again, hopefully you're strapped in. Hopefully you got your seatbelt on. One more. Oh, I'll give you one more. Hold on. First edition. I remember watching a first edition base box. First edition base box. The top box in the hobby go for a little over $1,000, like $1,000 and some change. And at the time, I was like, I don't know if I want to spend $1,200 or $1,500 or whatever my max bid was. So I just let it go. I tapped out. So a little over $1,000. I would struggle to find a buyer in that 1 to 2K range back then that I would today at 80 to 100. I mean, that's the world we're in today. Markets establish themselves over time. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, this idea of time traveling, I get it from like a nostalgia perspective, but keep that in mind. It's a fantasy. And if we really want to go deep into this, if we all could access that time machine, it would just ultimately be redundant. We'd just be right back to where we are now. Because every single person who has knowledge of the market today would just go back and be like, okay, we know this is going to happen. So the market's going to immediately create itself, basically to where we are today. So therefore, this is the best time to buy, bar none. I mean, bar none. Like, it's the easiest time. Like today, I sold like 15 of these boxes. I think I sold like 30 of these in either 24 to 48 hours. The brand new Japanese set with the new rarity. That wouldn't have happened. One other thing to throw at you, I'm trying to give you this, paint this landscape of what it was like back then. If Charizard was difficult to sell, you got to keep in mind, like, all of these other promos that are not even niche, like even Jungle. We're talking like the second set, Fossil, Rocket and Gym, all that stuff. That stuff was so hard to move. If Charizard was hard to move, everything else is underneath that. Maybe Ancient Mew back here is one of the few that was right there with Charizard. It's like a god tier popularity card, just like Charizard. But at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff was so hard to move. The markets really didn't exist. You had to create a lot of those markets. And I think that's what people don't understand again with risk, is a lot of these markets had to be created, and there's no way to quantify an indicator for that. Look at signatures, for example. He's got Charizard lying around here. This is a level of organization in my office. We got a signed base Charizard sitting right here. This wasn't a thing back in the day. I remember buying autographs. I remember buying majority of my Sugimoris like 10 years ago. Because like, oh, that's really cool. Like Sugimori signed a card. And people were like, oh, okay. And you paid, a fraction of what they go for today. That was pretty much all you had back then. You didn't have Arita doing signings. There were like numerous artists now doing signings. This is a whole market that just emerged in the past couple of years. And there was no indicator to tell you, oh, the signature market's going to sprout up around 2017. There's no indicator for that. And that's what I mean by risk. So if we go back and look at those signature purchases I made, from an investing point of view, that's the highest level of risk because there's no interest in them. I'm just that weirdo who liked signatures back in like 2010, when nobody else did. And that's what it was for like the trophy cards and, all this other stuff. I was pretty much the main guy. Like people would come to me and I would just buy it because I just really liked this stuff. Now, as I started selling, I saw the practicality, I saw the market behind it. I realized there's these variables here, why certain cards do better than others. And I really dug deep into that and realized, okay, there's like a formula here for cards that people like. And I also have that collector mindset, so I understand, what people are looking for. But again, at the end of the day, none of this stuff had any type of precedence. There was nothing there to indicate anything would happen the way it did. So keep in mind, today is by far, the best time in history to buy and sell. The only opportunity cost or the disadvantage is, yeah, sure, prices are higher. But again, keep in mind, you can sell the whatever it is, your first ed base box at 80K easier today than you could back then at 2K. That's what people got to remember. You got to remember that perspective because that's how you adapt through markets. I'm not saying that, it's going to be 80K forever. You might have retraces. You can have prices can go up, down, all around. But the bottom line is you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Entropy is a hell of a drug. You can't put it back in. Things like YouTube, Instagram, E4, sales data, whatever it is. All this stuff is not only out there as a staple, it's still evolving. There's new YouTubers that are messaging me all the time. People all the time messaging me about everything now. So therefore, we're still in motion. You can still look at all the data and see where you can get a good feel for where things are going in the short term. But again, just keep in mind, first to market was by far the riskiest time. And again, it's not just Pokemon, it's the same for everything. Everything. Sure, the prices were lower, but the market literally didn't exist. So again, no indicator. Only with our luxury or our privilege or whatever you want to call it of hindsight that we can say, oh yeah, I should have bought it this time. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But again, that's a fantasy. And if you really could fulfill that fantasy, we could all go in the time machine. It would ultimately be redundant because we'd all just be right back to where we are. So there you go, guys. Hopefully that was a good discussion. I had a lot of fun. There was like a thread on E4 recently, some about how does luck play a role. Really good topic, by the way. And I think this is relevant to that. It's something that comes up a lot. First to market is an idea that a lot of people, I think, romanticize because, of course, you see those prices. You're like, oh, wow, I wish I could get those prices today in this market where I could, instantly communicate with everyone and instantly get sales data. But back then, none of that existed. So there it is, guys. Deal. Let me know how you feel. Hopefully this is useful. And that's pretty much it. Till next time.